My name is Judith, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. But here I am, 60 years old, sitting in my quiet suburban house, reflecting on how my life turned upside down. For years, I was just your average accountant, crunching numbers at a small firm in the city. I loved my job, found comfort in the orderly rows of figures, and took pride in balancing books to the last penny. But my real passion? That was my son, Michael. I raised Michael alone after my husband, Tom, died of cancer when our boy was just 10. I poured everything I had into being both mother and father to him, determined to give him the best life I could manage. Then, about 10 years ago, my parents passed away within months of each other. It was a brutal blow, losing them both so quickly. But amidst the grief came an unexpected windfall. They left me a sizable inheritance. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the legal documents in disbelief. The figure seemed astronomical to me, a lifeline I never expected. With shaking hands, I called Michael. "Mom, what's up?" he answered, sounding distracted. He was in his final year of college then, studying web design. "Michael, you won't believe this. Your grandparents, they left us money. A lot of money." There was a pause on the other end. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" I told him the figure, and I heard him let out a low whistle. "Holy shit, Mom, that's life-changing money." Language, I admonished automatically, but I was smiling. "I know, honey, I'm still in shock." In the end, I decided to use the money to buy a house in the suburbs. It was a lovely place, with a big yard and enough room for both Michael and me. I paid off all my loans, set aside a good chunk for emergencies and Michael's future, and still had a decent amount left in savings. Michael moved in with me after he graduated. He landed a good job at a tech startup in the city, and I was over the moon with pride. Watching him leave for work each morning in his crisp shirts and shiny shoes, I felt like all my hard work had paid off. We fell into a comfortable routine. I continued working at my accounting job, more because I enjoyed it than because we needed the money. Michael threw himself into his career, often working late into the night on freelance projects. It was a warm spring evening when Michael came home with a spring in his step and a gleam in his eye. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when he burst in. "Mom, I've got news," he exclaimed, grinning from ear to ear. "I met someone. Her name's Rachel. She's amazing, Mom. I think she might be the one." I felt a mixture of joy and apprehension wash over me. My little boy, in love? It seemed impossible. But the look on his face, I knew this was serious. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, forcing a smile. "When do I get to meet her?" Rachel swept into our lives like a whirlwind. She was beautiful, no doubt about that, all flowing blonde hair and dazzling smile. But there was something about her that set my teeth on edge from the start. The first time Michael brought her home, she greeted me with a hug that felt a touch too tight, her perfume cloying in my nostrils. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, I've heard so much about you," she gushed, her voice syrupy sweet. "Michael just adores you." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the warning bells in my head. "Please, call me Judith." "It's lovely to meet you, Rachel." As we sat down to dinner, Rachel dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of her job in marketing and her world travels. Michael sat there, hanging on her every word, a dopey grin on his face. As the weeks went by, Rachel became a constant presence in our home. She had a way of making herself comfortable, sprawling on our couch like she owned the place, leaving her things scattered around. One evening, as I was tidying up after dinner, I overheard Rachel on the phone in the living room. Thinking she might be ready for dessert, I started to walk in, but her words stopped me cold. "I know, right?" she was saying, her voice low and nasty. "You should see this place. It's gorgeous. And that stupid old woman has no idea. Once we're married, it'll all be ours." I backed away silently, my mind reeling. How could I tell Michael what I'd heard? Would he even believe me? In the end, I decided to keep quiet. I'd bide my time, watch Rachel closely. If she was really up to no good, she'd slip up eventually. And I'd be there when she did. Weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, Michael was down on one knee, presenting Rachel with a diamond ring that must have cost him a fortune. "Mom, we're getting married," he announced, his face alight with joy. I plastered on a smile, hugging them both. "That's wonderful news," I lied through my teeth. Rachel smirked at me over Michael's shoulder, her eyes glittering with triumph. In that moment, I knew I was in for the fight of my life. The day of the wedding arrived, sunny and warm. I stood in the small chapel, watching my son pledge his life to a woman I was growing to despise. But I smiled and clapped and posed for photos, playing the part of the proud mother. After the reception, I helped clean up, my heart heavy. As I was gathering up the last of the decorations, Michael approached me, looking sheepish. "Hey, Mom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Rachel and I were talking, and, well, we were wondering if we could stay at the house for a while. Just until we find a place of our own." I felt my stomach drop. This was exactly what I'd been dreading. But looking at Michael's hopeful face, I couldn't bring myself to say no. "Of course, honey," I heard myself say. "Stay as long as you need." Michael's face lit up. He hugged me tight, whispering, "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." The weeks following the wedding were a whirlwind of change. Rachel moved into our home with an enthusiasm that bordered on zealotry. She rearranged furniture, hung new curtains, and generally treated the place like her own personal dollhouse. I tried to be accommodating, reminding myself that this was Michael's wife now, and she deserved to feel at home. But it was hard not to feel like I was being slowly edged out of my own space. One morning, as I was making coffee in the kitchen, Rachel bounced in, her face glowing. "Judith, we have the most wonderful news," she exclaimed, clutching her stomach meaningfully. My heart sank as I realized what she was implying. "You're pregnant?" Rachel nodded, her smile wide. "We just found out yesterday. Isn't it exciting?" I forced a smile, congratulating her as warmly as I could manage. Inside, I was panicking. A baby meant they'd be staying longer, maybe permanently. The baby arrived on a crisp autumn morning, a little boy they named Ethan. He was beautiful, with Michael's dark hair and Rachel's blue eyes. Despite my misgivings about the situation, I couldn't help but fall in love with my grandson. But any joy I felt was quickly overshadowed by the reality of life with a newborn in the house. Rachel, predictably, shirked most of the responsibility onto me. "Judith, can you take Ethan? I need my beauty sleep," she'd say, dumping the crying baby in my arms at 2 a.m. Or, "I'm just not cut out for changing diapers." "You don't mind, do you?" I was exhausted, trying to juggle my job, housework, and now childcare. When I gently suggested that Rachel might need to step up more, she flew into a rage. "How dare you," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "I just had a baby. I'm doing the best I can." Michael, of course, took her side. "Mom, cut Rachel some slack," he said, his voice stern. "Being a new mother is hard." I wanted to scream. What about me? Didn't I count for anything anymore? But I swallowed my words, not wanting to cause more drama. As Ethan grew, the situation only worsened. Rachel spent her days shopping or lunching with friends, while I juggled work and childcare. Michael was rarely home, throwing himself into his career and leaving me to deal with his wife and child. The confrontation with Rachel marked the beginning of a tumultuous period in our household. Quarrels and scandals became a daily occurrence, with Michael invariably siding with his wife. I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around to avoid setting off another argument. One particularly bad day, I found myself knocking on my neighbor Carol's door, desperate for a friendly ear. Carol, a retired schoolteacher with a no-nonsense attitude, listened as I poured out my troubles over a cup of tea. "Judith, honey," she said, her eyes filled with concern. "This isn't right. You can't let them treat you this way in your own home. Have you considered evicting them?" I gasped, shocked at the suggestion. "Evict them? But they're my son and grandson." I can't just throw them out on the street. Why not? Carol challenged. They're adults. They can find their own place to live. You've done more than enough for them. Despite Carol's advice, I couldn't bring myself to take such drastic measures. I still held out hope that we could find a way to keep the peace, to be a family again. So I endured, day after day, month after month, year after year. Before I knew it, several years had passed in this tense, uncomfortable limbo. My 60th birthday arrived on a crisp autumn day. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of hope. Surely, they wouldn't forget my birthday? I spent the morning baking a cake, humming to myself as I frosted it carefully. Michael had taken Ethan for a walk, and I eagerly awaited their return. I imagined Ethan's excited face as he presented me with a handmade card, Michael's warm hug and wishes for many happy returns. The front door opened, and I hurried to the hallway, a smile on my face. But my heart sank as I saw Michael and Rachel enter, without Ethan. "Where's Ethan?" I asked, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. Rachel smirked, hanging up her coat. "Oh, we dropped him off at my mother's for the weekend. We decided to have a little romantic getaway." "But, it's my birthday," I said weakly. Michael shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "We needed some alone time, Mom. You understand, right?" I watched in disbelief as they strolled into the kitchen, retrieved a bottle of wine, and poured themselves generous glasses. They clinked glasses, giggling like teenagers, completely ignoring me. I made a cake," I said, gesturing to my creation on the counter. "I thought we could celebrate." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, Judith, don't be so needy. We're trying to have a romantic weekend here. Why don't you go to your room and, I don't know, read a book or something?" I felt my temper flare. "Excuse me? This is my house, and it's my birthday. I don't think it's too much to ask for a little celebration with my family." Michael slammed his glass down, wine sloshing over the rim. "For God's sake, Mom. Can't you think about someone other than yourself for once? We need this time together. Just, go to your room and keep your head down, okay?" Before I could react, I felt hands on my arms, roughly shoving me towards the door. I stumbled, realizing with horror that it was Michael manhandling me. "Michael, stop. What are you doing?" I cried, struggling against his grip. I heard Rachel's malice voice from behind me. "You heard him. Get out of our sight and stay on the street where you belong." With a final shove, I found myself outside in the pouring rain, still wearing my house dress and slippers. The door slammed behind me, the lock clicking with chilling finality. I stood there, rain soaking through my clothes, mixing with the tears streaming down my face. How had it come to this? My own son, throwing me out of my home on my 60th birthday? Soaked to the bone and shivering, I found myself once again on Carol's doorstep. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. "Judith, what on earth happened to you?" she exclaimed, pulling me inside. Through chattering teeth and hiccuping sobs, I recounted the cruel events of the evening. Carol's face darkened with each word, her jaw clenching in anger. "That's it," she said firmly once I'd finished. "Enough is enough, Judith. I'm calling my son, Jake. He's a lawyer. He'll know what to do." Before I could protest, she was dialing. Within minutes, she'd arranged for me to meet Jake at his office first thing in the morning. "Now," Carol said, handing me some dry clothes, "you're staying here tonight. Tomorrow, we fight back." I spent a restless night on Carol's couch, my mind racing. At dawn, I snuck back into my house. Michael and Rachel were still asleep, oblivious to my return. Quietly, I gathered my phone, important documents, and a change of clothes, stuffing them into my purse. Jake's office was sleek and professional, a stark contrast to my disheveled state. He listened intently as I told my story, his face grave. "Mrs. Thompson," he said when I'd finished, "what they've done to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's legally actionable. We can file for eviction immediately." I hesitated. "Eviction? But, where will they go? Jake's eyes softened. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, that's not your concern anymore. They're adults who've abused your generosity. It's time to reclaim your life. He leaned forward, his voice serious. There's something else we should consider. Given your daughter-in-law's manipulative behavior, it might be worth investigating her background. I know a reputable private detective who could dig into her past. The old me would have balked at the suggestion. But sitting there, in my borrowed clothes, I felt a steely resolve settle over me. Do it, I said firmly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Jake filed for eviction, presenting a compelling case of emotional abuse and unlawful occupation. To my shock and relief, the court ruled in my favor. The day of the eviction arrived. I stood in the driveway, watching as Michael and Rachel hurriedly packed their belongings into a moving truck. Rachel spotted me and stormed over, her face contorted with rage. "You miserable old filth," she hissed. "You'll regret this. I swear, I'll make you pay for what you've done." As she stomped away, I caught sight of Michael. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw a flicker of something. Regret? Shame? But then his face hardened, and he turned away without a word. The hardest part was watching them drive away with Ethan. My grandson's confused face peered out the car window, and my heart clenched. Rachel's parting words rang in my ears. "Don't think you'll ever see him again. He's our son, not yours." A few weeks after the eviction, I was just settling into my new, quieter life when my phone rang. It was Jake's private detective, and his voice was urgent. "Mrs. Thompson, you need to come to my office immediately. What we've uncovered about your daughter-in-law, it's worse than we could have imagined." Heart pounding, I rushed to meet him. What he told me left me reeling. Rachel Daniels, formerly Rachel Winters, the detective began, spreading photos across his desk. Suspected of murdering her first husband, James Winters, 5 years ago. I gasped. Murder? But, how? He pushed a police report towards me. Mr. Winters died in a car crash. Toxicology showed a massive dose of sleeping pills in his system. But they couldn't prove Rachel administered them, so she walked free. My mind was spinning. There's more, the detective continued grimly. Rachel had a child with James. After his death, she gave the baby up for adoption. Disappeared for a while, then resurfaced, and met your son. I felt sick. Oh God, Michael. Ethan. The detective nodded gravely. We found new evidence. A witness saw Rachel tampering with James's coffee the morning of the crash. And we tracked down the doctor who prescribed Rachel those same sleeping pills. I stood up, my legs shaky. We have to go to the police. Now. The next few days were a blur of police stations, statements, and shocking headlines. Killer bride, screamed one newspaper. Mother-in-law unmasks murderer, declared another. Rachel was arrested, her face a mask of fury as they led her away. I couldn't help but shudder, remembering her threats of revenge. Michael was devastated. He threw himself into proving Rachel's innocence, hiring expensive lawyers, draining his savings. One day, he showed up at my door, looking haggard and desperate. "Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I need to borrow money. For Rachel's bail." I shook my head sadly. "I'm sorry, Michael. I can't do that." His face contorted with rage. "This is all your fault," he shouted. "You've ruined everything. My marriage, my life, Ethan's future." I tried to reason with him. "Michael, please. I did this to protect you and Ethan. Rachel is dangerous." "Shut up," he roared. "You're nothing but a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see me happy. I hate you for what you've done. I wish you weren't my mother." His words cut deep, each one a dagger to my heart. As he stormed off, I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. How had it come to this? The trial was a media circus. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as evidence was presented, witnesses testified. Rachel sat stone-faced, while Michael looked more broken each day. During a recess, Michael approached me. His eyes were cold, filled with loathing. "Are you happy now?" he spat. "You've destroyed our lives. I hope you're proud of yourself." I reached out to him, my heart breaking. "Son, please. I never wanted this. I only wanted to keep you and Ethan safe." But he turned away, deaf to my pleas. As I watched him walk back to Rachel's side, I realized with a sinking heart that I might have lost my son forever. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience. The trial was far from over, and I knew there were more storms to weather. But I was done being a victim. Whatever came next, I would face it head-on. The trial had been dominating the news for weeks when an unexpected turn of events shook everything up. I was watching the evening news when my phone rang. It was Jake, his voice tense with excitement. "Judith, you need to come down to the station right away. Someone's come forward with new information about Rachel." When I arrived, I found the police station in a flurry of activity. Jake led me to an interview room where a nervous-looking woman sat, wringing her hands. "This is Melissa," Jake explained. She was Rachel's friend. Melissa looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out. "I should have come forward sooner, but I was scared." Over the next hour, Melissa unraveled a tale that chilled me to the bone. Rachel had confided in her, detailing her plans to get rid of me, then Michael, all to get her hands on my house and assets. "She had it all planned out," Melissa said, her voice shaking. "She was going to push you down the stairs, make it look like an accident. But then you kicked them out, and it ruined her plan." I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized how close I'd come to death, without even knowing it. All those times Rachel had given me that calculating look, had she been planning my demise? The police took Melissa's statement seriously, immediately updating the charges against Rachel. When the news broke, it was like a bomb had gone off in our lives. I was at home when Michael showed up at my door, looking shell-shocked. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Was Rachel really planning to kill you? To kill me?" I nodded, unable to find words. Michael stumbled into the house, collapsing onto the couch with his head in his hands. "Oh God," he moaned. "What have I done? How could I have been so blind?" Over the next few days, Michael's world continued to unravel. He stopped paying Rachel's lawyers, refused to post her bail. He filed for divorce and began proceedings to terminate Rachel's parental rights. Rachel, desperate and cornered, tried to convince Michael it was all a lie, that she was being framed. But the evidence was overwhelming, and for the first time, Michael began to see through her manipulations. One afternoon, Michael came to see me again. He stood on my porch, looking lost and broken. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. For everything. I was horrible to you, I said such awful things. Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who I'd loved unconditionally for so long. I saw his pain, his regret. But I also remembered the years of neglect, the harsh words, the way he'd thrown me out of my own home. "Michael," I said firmly, "I'm glad you've seen the truth about Rachel. And I'm relieved that you and Ethan are safe now. But I'm not ready to forgive you. The hurt is still too fresh." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But, would you be willing to see Ethan? He misses you so much." At the mention of my grandson, my heart softened. "Yes," I said. "I'd love to see Ethan." The next day, Ethan came to visit. As I hugged my grandson close, I knew that things would be different this time. I would be a grandmother, yes, but also Judith Thompson, a woman with her own life, her own interests, and her own strength.